When we think about the history of Palestine, our minds usually jump straight to the 20th century. But what if I told you the blueprints were actually being drawn up a whole 100 years earlier? Today, we're going to dig into this fascinating 1918 paper that uncovers a long forgotten story of British plans for the region. And these plans, well, they started not with politics, but with something else entirely.
So you gotta ask, what was behind the century-long British fascination? I mean, was it all about empire, raw strategy? Well, the answer, and this is what's so wild, has almost nothing to do with geopolitics. It all starts with biblical prophecy.
All right, Section 1, a prophetic interest. The whole story really kicks off with a heated theological debate.
Okay, so picture this. It's the early 1800s. The Napoleonic Wars are just tearing Europe apart. And over in Britain, you've got this guy, James Bacino. He's not just watching the battles, he's reading the Bible. And he's convinced that all this chaos isn't random. It's a sign.
Bicinio, who was a dissenting minister, was basically arguing that the headlines of his day were fulfilling ancient biblical prophecies. He believed a Jewish return to Palestine wasn't some far-off, abstract idea. No, he thought it was imminent, like it could happen in his own lifetime, maybe even with a push from a great power like Napoleon's France or his very own Britain.
But, of course, this idea didn't just go unchallenged. A guy named Thomas Weatherby immediately fired back, arguing Bacino had it completely backward. Weatherby's take was that this wasn't about politics or armies. It was about spiritual transformation first. To him, Bacino's ideas were premature, maybe even a little dangerous. And this exact debate, this clash between political action and spiritual waiting, would pretty much frame the entire conversation for decades to come. Okay, so let's move on and see how this very religious idea gets tangled up in Britain's hard-nosed strategic interests. The conversation was about to take a dramatic turn. So by the 1830s, the conversation totally shifts from prayer to power. You see, the Ottoman Empire, which controlled Palestine, was known as the sick man of Europe. It was crumbling. And this created a huge power vacuum that really worried Britain. Why? Because the land route to India, the absolute crown jewel of its empire, was suddenly looking incredibly vulnerable. And look, this wasn't some fringe debate happening in the shadows. It was front-page news. Major papers like The Times were now framing Jewish restoration as a core issue of British imperial policy. They were literally connecting the dots between Palestine and the security of Britain's massive empire in the East. The idea had officially gone mainstream. And this thinking very quickly led to actual policy proposals. The influential philanthropist Lord Shaftesbury took a formal plan straight to the Foreign Secretary. His argument was this brilliant mix of morality and military strategy. He was saying, look, securing a home for Jewish settlers isn't just a good deed. It's a strategic move to create a stable, friendly population right there, protecting our most vital imperial lifeline. Now, this growing imperial interest wasn't just talk. It inspired some very real, practical, though often challenging, attempts to actually turn these blueprints into reality right there on the ground.
A really central figure in this effort was Sir Moses Montefiore. He was a hugely respected philanthropist, but he wasn't content with just debating ideas back in London. No, this guy traveled to Palestine 7 separate times to try and build a new reality with his own 2 hands, focusing on agricultural development.
And Montefiore's plan just shows how concrete these ideas were becoming. Seriously, this wasn't a philosophical pamphlet. This was a business proposal. He went to Muhammad Ali, the Egyptian ruler who controlled Palestine at the time, with a plan to form a company, raise capital back in London, and lease enough land for 200 villages. This was all about making the dream a profitable, real-world enterprise.
But here's where we see a pattern start to emerge. Muhammad Ali was supposedly interested, but before any deal could be done, geopolitics got in the way. The great powers of Europe forced him to return Palestine to the Ottomans, and just like that, the entire project collapsed. It's a perfect, if painful, example of how fragile these ambitious plans really were.
So all of this builds to a kind of climax in the 1870s and 80s, with the emergence of these grand, ambitious schemes that were aimed at the very highest levels of government and, honestly, had a real shot at succeeding. The diplomat Laurence Oliphant just perfectly captured the unique blend of motives that were now driving everything. He totally understood that the powerful, sentimental, or religious interest in the project was exactly what made the commercial speculation even possible. One couldn't succeed without the other.
His plan for this huge colony in the land of Gilead was incredibly sophisticated. It was basically designed as a win-win-win. For the Ottomans, it promised a new source of tax revenue and a loyal population. For Jewish people, it offered a self-supporting, autonomous home. And for Britain, it meant securing a key strategic buffer zone and this is an interesting little detail, a way to redirect Jewish immigration away from England itself.
And let me be clear, this was not some fringe idea cooked up in a pub. Support for this thing rested on three incredibly powerful pillars at the very top of the British establishment: the Prime Minister himself, the Foreign Secretary, and even the future king. With that kind of backing, this was the closest any of these plans had ever come to becoming reality.
But then, the same old problem struck again. Politics. A change of government back in London meant the Ottomans suddenly got cold feet. The plan's greatest strength, its official British backing, instantly became its fatal weakness. The whole project was dead in the water.
So when you step back and you look at what this 1918 paper really reveals, it's just this stunning, century-long evolution of an idea. It starts out as a theological debate about prophecy and slowly but surely transforms into a series of detailed, practical blueprints for imperial strategy and nation-building.
So what's the big takeaway from unearthing this forgotten history? Well, it's a powerful reminder that the maps of our modern world are often drawn with very, very old ink. It just goes to show how these powerful forces of faith, empire, and raw ambition can intersect to shape a future in ways that probably no one at the time could have ever imagined.